IVM.
The ecosystem of modern platforms has been grown by professionals who've helped them scale in the market by building awareness and capitalizing on opportunities that come with it. And so there is a lot for all of us to learn from their career journeys and their own personal learnings across these journeys. One such professional who I had the pleasure of having multiple interactions with has been Arjun Koradi, the head of sales for Spotify India. And I thought it would be interesting to have a chat with him, not just about his present stint at Spotify and how brands and audio need to engage, but also run through his previous ones at Google and Facebook to dig a little deeper into his learnings across his career. That's what's ahead in this week's episode of Advertising is Dead. I'm Varun Dugirala, the co-founder and content chief of The Glitch. Right back with Advertising is Dead.
Have you ever wondered how successful people do their thing? How do they navigate the challenges they often face? Are you wondering about the future of restaurants, film, education, technology, and everything else in between? Hi, I'm Gauri Devidayal, best known for being one of the brains behind The Table, an award-winning restaurant in Bombay. One thing my life as a restaurateur has given me is the opportunity to meet with some truly inspiring people, most often just by chatting with strangers at the community table. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about learning the new dimensions of business and understanding how different people swim this sea. It's an opportunity for me to pick their brains and ask them all the questions on my mind, whether it's about learning from their past experiences or talking about future trends. Through their journeys, stories, and insights, I hope you too, like me, will come away inspired and energized. So come, join me every Wednesday with your favorite drink, because this round is on me.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Arjun. Hey Arjun, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Varun. And I must say, it feels like I've arrived, right? This is one of the shows that I've had on my list for a long time, obviously an avid listener. So thank you for having me.
You know, one of the things that I actually have enjoyed, and you and I have been on, I think that you and I end up meeting mostly on panels.
Yep.
You and I have been together on, I don't know how many panels, and I've stopped counting.
Yeah. I think just like they talk about manners, right? I think they need to start saying, "Here, Arjun and Varun." You know, too much.
Yeah, I get an audio panel. Let's call Varun and Arjun together. We can get two sides of the thing. And I think what's been interesting is that whenever I've had a conversation with you, otherwise as well, what I've always got out of it is that it's not just a perspective on just Spotify and how that space is, but I mean, I've always enjoyed the broader understanding that you have of the entire space, right? And that's one of the things I actually want to kind of tap into when we chat today. But to kind of take a step back, I mention this quite often that before I get any guest on, I do this weird thing where I run through what's on their LinkedIn, where all have they been, what all have they done. You've been at Google, then Facebook, then Spotify, which I mean, for a lot of people are places that you really want to work at. So kind of starting from that, if you look at the early days of let's say when you started off at Google onwards, what is different about working for companies like these? I mean, I think that's kind of a great place to kind of start, and then we'll move ahead.
Yeah, I think that's it's also a very, I think, complicated question. More difficult than it sounds. I think one, just being incredibly fortunate, lucky, right? It wasn't part of any plan. You know, many times you just end up being in the right place at the right time. I just happened to be fortunate to have these companies. I should also mention that before Spotify, I spent like maybe a couple of years at a nonprofit as well. Yeah. So it's been interesting. I think Google, I was there from 2005 to 12. It was really what I would say the Wild West of like everything was new. Nobody really knew what was happening. You know, you had to explain the internet to people, pre-display network, pre-YouTube, pre-Android, right? So it was largely just search. And if I think about my own journey, like to get into Google at that time, I would have joined Google at the most entry-level role possible, right? I mean, there wasn't anybody lower in the hierarchy than me when I joined Google, and we had 13 interviews. I had 13 interviews, right? Wow. I had 13 interviews. Each of them was tough. Each of them was pushed you hard. So I think one of the things that I've realized about, for example, all of these companies in common, then I can talk about the differences maybe later. But what I found common is there is a lot of high degree of importance given to making sure that you're getting the right people in the door, right? So the entry barriers obviously are difficult. right? I wouldn't say, I mean, for engineering, it may be a very different way because it's all going to be technical. But if you're sort of a sales guy like me, you're on the business side of things, entry barriers are tough. It is a rigorous process. But what's really great about it is once you've established that trust and you bring the person in, then it's your little kingdom, right? It's up to you. What do you want to achieve? How far do you want to go? What are the projects you want to pick up? So there's a lot of independence. There's a lot of sort of trust and faith and transparency. And I think that's sort of the core of what sets the right culture, right? So, people always talk to me and ask me about, free lunches and lava lamps and beanbag, that's just what is visible, but that's not really culture, right? I think culture is that empowerment of people to take tough decisions, as a relatively junior employee, how much can you really drive? What do you want to do? Go out and achieve it. So I think, both in terms of giving you that confidence and a platform to do well, giving you the trust to do well as learning, right? Insane amounts of learning. I guess even now it's pretty much same. The curves are probably pretty steep, but back in the day, we had to go and tell people L shape mein ad aate hain, right? Koi search karta hai to ye upar wala 3 actually ad hai, right? So to start from that point, there was no brand, there was no video, none of that. I think the learning curves are amazing. And when you're surrounded by really smart, super achiever kind of people who've done really well for themselves or who have a very clear vision, automatically you sort of rise up with that tide. So I think one is really that, which is the focus on people, the culture, and everything comes from that. I think from that point of view, if you look at Google or Facebook, obviously at a very senior level, top level, there's a lot of common DNA, right? Cheryl was ex-Google, she's moved over to Facebook, David Fisher. So culturally, both were Silicon Valley companies, so there was a lot of similarities. I think the differences were that Facebook was obviously the product of a different sort of generation. So like to give you a simple example, if you had to sign a BD contract, right, you probably would get it done 10 times faster if you were doing it at Facebook than at Google, right? So I think those were sort of the differences that I would see, but really it's about how they would find the right people for the role, enable them, empower them, and drive it through. And you can see it, right? So if you take simple examples, right? Okay, let's make all the railway stations Wi-Fi, right? Let's do internet sathi and take. Those are not things that anybody would just think of doing if it was just business as usual, right? So I think those are the kind of things that make these companies special, along with the people that you work with.
What's also interesting about this entire period in which your career graph happened is that's actually the time, like you mentioned, that initially you had to actually explain to people what all could actually happen, how they could get value out of it, to now when everything is digital and it's so native, although there are still many learning curves left. How have you seen that entire ecosystem kind of evolve, in terms of how that kind of, from not just from how you work, but even from a broader perspective as well?
Yeah, I think I look at it from 2 or 3 angles, right? One is users always lead, right? So you don't have to explain to a user why search is important or meaningful. They get it, right? It's the people who are trying to reach these users that you need to convince in many ways, right? And many times what happens is it is clouded by your personal, main to search nahi karta, right? I'm talking about 2005. Now, obviously, those are not conversations. But back in, so one is really what are users doing and how is that behavior changing and how can you contextualize it for the industry? If you think back to the early days of Google, the early advertisers were all online businesses and the early online businesses, right? So classifieds, your Naukri, Monster, etc., your sort of Yatra, Make My Trip, right? So the early Indian companies who were setting up digitally obviously realized that search is critical to their funnel, user acquisition business, etc. So they were the pioneers. Yeah. I think then the products have to evolve because you can't go to a Unilever and talk about search, right? Obviously, search has some role to play, but what is search really at the end of the day outside of maybe? Again, I'm talking from a context of 2005, 2006, 2007, right? So then obviously the products need to evolve to suit the entire set of markets. So if you think of even simple things like remarketing, right? I remember it was like a magical concept here. Somebody came to your website and I can actually reach them somewhere else, right? You had to, now it's just a term. Anybody understands what remarketing is, right? So you had to, so as the product evolved, as things became more layered, more complicated, how do you take the ecosystem with you, right? And I think there, what I've noticed is that usually you have to do it like you drag them by the scruff of the neck, kicking and screaming, right? There's no other way. And in that evolution, usually the brands are faster than agencies, right? So I think in the early days, it was more of agencies were a lot more defensive, where clients would usually get it. Yeah. Now, of course, there's no question, right? Everybody
there's no choice.
There's no choice. There's no question. Like, people understand, of course. Then evolutions up. So to sort of paraphrase, so Google, obviously, you work through that cycle of, okay, YouTube acquisition happened. Now what do you do, right? Are people actually watching video online? To today, where you have 3-second ads, 2 ads before every video, and so on. Similarly, if you think of Facebook, I would say from an evolution point of view, obviously you have to remember that when Facebook launched, Orkut was the number one social media network. I have a T-shirt that says Orkut MTV Youth Icon of the Year, right? And I think that was
I think I was at MTV at that point in time, so I remember this vividly.
Yeah, so I have that T-shirt, right? And we used to sell Orkut ads, and people were like, Facebook, it's very complicated. It's too mature a product for India. People will not get it. Yeah. 2 years later, Orkut is dead. Facebook is everything. But even then, it sounds easy. Now it sounds like it was going to happen, but it was not obvious at all. If you think back to when the IPO happened for Facebook, one of the biggest things they called out is, you guys don't even have a mobile product, right? The world is going mobile. Tumhare paas mobile to kuch hai nahi, right?
Correct.
We used to sell logout ads, right? Which was on the web. Once you log out, on the logout page, there would be a big banner, right? Now it all sounds so sort of archaic.
So ancient.
Right? Yeah. So I think there the challenge was that you had to move the market even beyond what Google had to do in many cases, because when Facebook first started, what was happening on the platform was brands were in this arms race for fans, right? So if Nokia has, I don't know if I should mention brands, but anyway, if X has 1 million fans, then Y wants 2 million fans, right?
Correct.
And so in many cases, it was complicated because the head of digital or the CMO has a KPI. I will bring this many fans, right? So how do you then get them to change?
I'll give you a weirder angle of fans. Is that what would happen is that if you are marketing movies, if a certain actor's movie got X number of fans, if their page got that, his next movie expectation had to get bigger than that. It didn't matter if that second movie was terrible compared to the first one, or like worse, if that's the word. But I agree, this rat race for fans.
Yeah. So if you think back to the platforms in those days, we literally had to go and tell these guys, boss, you want to sell, cars, phones, detergent, whatever it is, right? Focus on that. Focus on the outcomes. Focus on how are you going to reach these people, right? And of course, then mobile happened. You then have to sort of retranslate the whole video ecosystem, tell people to 6-second ad karo, do it without sound, right? So I think in many cases, the same trend continues, which is the user leads. And then you want to get the brands to sort of figure out, okay, where are the users going? How are you going to catch up, right? Yeah. And then you drag the agencies with you to sort of start building those business solutions and so on. So, and I think with Spotify, it's pretty much the same boat. We are in the days when we are going and telling people, audio is there, people are listening. So in many ways, the curve is similar, but just the context.
You literally come to each of these companies when they were in that specific curve, if you think about it. Now, when I would already say it.
Yeah, and it's the funnest part, right? So I remember people saying that if somebody gives you a ticket on a rocket ship, right, don't ask which seat, right? Just jump on. So I think that's basically what happened. So I think users have led. Obviously, India, if you look at the overall macro ecosystem, digital is growing the fastest, has been growing for the longest time. In terms of the global ad economy, we are now amongst the top largest markets. Most of the growth in the global advertising world is coming from India. So it's starting to show off. But a lot of what we have today is because of the deep investments in time and ecosystem building that companies like Google and Facebook did over the last decade.
Yeah. Speaking of Spotify, right? What I find interesting is that it's a very different company. I've realized, at least from my conversation from you and a couple of, I think I ended up meeting a bunch of you all over time. Is that culturally you operate also very differently in the sense that there is a, that's me talking outside in that sense of the word. But also what I find interesting is that audio as a product has always been interesting for me to kind of explain, is that it's not like audio hasn't been around. A lot of the other ones were fresh products. I mean, they were reimagined for the digital space, but audio is always considered radio. And then everybody who would turn to a streaming platform, which was audio, and say, oh, this is just online radio, but there's so much more than that. And I'd love to hear your point of view about how kind of getting brands to reinvest in audio, something they used to do, moved away from videos, everything, coming back towards this kind of a thought process of this is what audio can actually do for you. How has that aspect kind of been for you?
Yeah, I think one, we're obviously very early in the journey, right? If you think of the overall pie, obviously once Google and Facebook have had their share, whatever is remaining is what everybody's sort of going after. But if you think of it from an overall ecosystem point of view, several things have happened. One is audio seems to be interesting to everybody, right? So Apple obviously has its entire ecosystem around audio. Amazon has an entire ecosystem. Google has an entire ecosystem, right? So it's not like it's only a Spotify play. I think generally, if you look at the main companies that are driving consumer behavior, that are the large platforms, everybody is interested, investing, building for audio. Whether you want to think, like I have this disconnect where many times voice and audio is sort of clubbed together. I don't really see that clubbing happening. But irrespective, so there is that whole wave happening anyway. So I think that's the macro thing, right? People have devices, connectivity, etc. So that's anyway the ecosystem is sort of set up for it. I think from an advertising or a brand point of view, I think there are two things. One is the lack of measurability, the lack of evolution of radio, right? And the behavior of doing radio advertising was fundamentally sort of two things that always kept it in its place, right? It never witnessed the kind of growth that it should have, right? You ask anybody, what is the total reach for some radio station? It's very difficult to get a concrete answer, right? So one is, I feel in the existing audio ecosystem, if you think of it as radio or whatever it was before streaming became big, it just never accelerated, kept pace with time, tech, etc. So there was an innate need here. I want to do this, but it's just not good enough for me. What the systems that exist, the numbers that exist, the capability that exists, just not good enough for me. So one is, hey, if you've always wanted to do it, here's a better way now, right? Sure. And so that is one aspect. I think the second aspect is that really what you want, like from a streaming point of view, what brands ultimately want to do is you want to reach your consumers, you want to reach them with the right message at the right time, right? The fundamentals don't really change which platform it is. So now, again, it's an example of sort of users leading, because obviously that shift is happening significantly with Corona and all that. It has obviously accelerated. So the opportunity is there, right? It's similar to saying the people are there. When are the brands going to catch up? When are agencies going to catch up? When are they going to really tap into that potential? And that's what we are focused on in terms of everything that we're doing to build a narrative around audio. What are the things that people care about? They want to do great creative. They want to understand their audience better and get some sort of, nuances about how they should reach these people. They want to be able to measure it and understand what the outcomes are, right? You want to measure brand, you want to measure sales, whatever. So if you are able to contextualize audio within the framework that they're anyway doing digital, then it's just one more format, right? Yeah. Then it's a question of, okay, how am I going to make the best of this format, right? And that's what we need to help solve for. So I think it's a combination. The radio lack of innovation / tech enablement, the fact that it was very crunched in a few moments in time and not throughout the day and so on. Yeah. Plus the fact that, tech ecosystems, etc., have caught up and users are already there. Brands just need to discover it and sort of move ahead with that.
Do you also see, just in terms of just looking at it from a brand perspective, right? A lot of brands say, if I put it up on video, I get X kind of numbers. Audio is obviously in a lower number range in that sense. And my point has always been about look at how long people stay engaged. And I've realized that with audio, that's a great metric to kind of put across has been the fact that see how long how long you retain an audience, especially from a podcast perspective or even in general. Versus in a video, the point with video has become shorter video. Whereas on audio, it's become almost get longer in that sense and more engaging in that sense. Yeah. So how much education are you seeing having to be done there? Obviously, there's a lot there.
Yeah, lots of education, I think, which is natural, right? Which is really why my core job, if somebody were to ask me, what do you do? Yeah. Sure, sales is all about the numbers and so on. But what I really do is, education, evangelization, inspiration, right? So you want to tell people what's possible. You want to, preach the gospel of audio, and then you want to show people, oh, wow, this is cool. I want to do it, right? And these are things that you really want to take. Now, just taking a step back from the question. So audio, I think behaviorally, there are so many things. One is obviously time spent, right? So on an average, you have 2.5 hours a day spent on streaming audio, which is insane. Right. Yeah. Now, it's not just 2.5 hours, it's also throughout the day. So if you think of my routine, I wake up in the morning, I have Alexa playing, my pick me up music, whatever it is, right? During work, I have my focus playlists. I have game night with the family when we play some board games. I have my podcasts when I'm sort of going for a walk. So your audio is soundtracking your lives. The behavior is already happening, right? Yeah. Now it's just about how do you really leverage that time spent to make sure that you're reaching the consumer in meaningful ways, right? So I think that's the other interesting thing, especially with younger people, right? So if you look at Gen Zs and so on, there is a very clear, and we run these consumer studies across markets to understand what are the behaviors that are driving this, right? And there is real screen fatigue, right? There is real sort of desire here. I mean, I want to stop death scrolling, right? I want to just, you look at things like screen time with Apple, right? And how people are sort of taking control over what they're consuming, how they're consuming. Of course, at this time, it is limited to a sort of evolved set of users, but that's, you design for the power users and the rest follow.
Yeah.
So I think that is very real. I was seeing the stat where somebody said that on an average online, you would probably expose to 5,000 brand messages in a day, right? And younger users are opting to sort of drop out of that, right? And it becomes your true moment to yourself. You're plugged in, you're listening, you're spending time. It could be a podcast, it could be music, which means it's uncluttered, it's plugged in, it's meaningful, right? You're not trying to outshout somebody else. You're not 50 pop-ups. I like, for example, if you look at Indian news websites, right? You have a perfect example of what not to do. So I think that's really what is driving that behavior. And when you have 2 hours of time spent on a platform, it is the responsibility of the brands, the agencies, and platforms like us to then translate that opportunity for people to use well.
I have a few more things to kind of dig into with you, but I do know we need to go for a break. I'm just going to do that and be back with Advertising is Dead.
I want to thank Intel for supporting our show. Do you remember when last year we spoke about how the Intel vPro platform is built for business? Well, I'm glad to say we've kicked things up a notch. That's right, Intel is back with a new and improved version of the platform. Optimized with 10th generation Intel Core processors, the platform is just what IT and business users need, especially in times like now when most of us are working from home. The new Intel vPro platform lets you do more of what you want and less of what you don't. So it's better for you and for your IT teams, who really are the backbone of keeping your work from home experience easy and enjoyable. The platform is built to minimize your efforts and maximize your PC productivity, especially when working from home. I can safely say that the new vPro platform gives you more enterprise efficiency with less constraints. Visit intel.in/morewithvpro, that's VPRO, to discover how you can get more done with less waiting. If you're listening on the IVM Podcast Android app, take a look at the screen right now and you'll see a link which will take you directly there.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Arjun. Are you seeing, obviously, I'll always like to categorize them in separate pieces, even when they come up with it. When you look at brands and look at agencies, I felt for at least in recent times, brands have understood the opportunities a lot faster. I think agencies have been slow to catch up in many cases because it's almost like also there's territories that have been drawn out over years, right? In terms of, okay, this is what I do, how would I have to change it, or why is somebody else coming into the mix over here? When you look at the content created per se, because I think a lot of it comes down to the kind of content you create and then what you build around it almost in terms of surround. What are you seeing as specific trends which are working in that sense?
So I think, one is for us, when we say content, it's really podcast, because music is not something that we create or brands are creating with us, right? They may be doing something independently. So I would say, so let me again break it up into two. One is agencies are a critical part of the ecosystem, right? If you build the right partnerships with them, they can be the most amazing drivers for you. But there are no generalizations, right? I think there are pockets of excellence and pockets of slack in every agency, right? So as a platform, you need to find those and sort of figure out where it goes, right? But that said, I think, again, given the explosion of platforms that have happened in the last 4 or 5 years, right? So for a long time, it was Google only, then Google and Facebook, and then suddenly one after the other, the frequency of new things coming up just increased, right? So you have TikTok, you have Twitch. By the way, I really miss TikTok, but TikTok, Twitch, all of that. So as a planner, right, if I was to look at a planner, the job has become just so much more complicated, right? So earlier, a 3-line media plan can now be like 20 lines, right? And it will vary ki tum cricket kar rahe ho to wo hoga, tum news kar rahe ho to ye hoga, right? So it's not, nobody's making it easy for them. So I think, one, you have to really be cognizant of that. Two, there are many strong relationships where agencies really are not just the payment processor, but are really are the custodians of the brand. They understand, they speak the language. So I think those are the opportunities for you to really work with them and drive it. So that's sort of the agency part of it, right? And it'll always be hit or miss, I think, but at least the awareness point of view that we need to do something is there, clearly, right? It's not, there's no resistance to change, I would say. It's just slower, right? Again, brands, it's not necessarily that brands are always faster. There are, again, pockets. There are several brands that, you still have to probably explain to them why to do digital, right? Before you get to audio.
Correct.
And there are several brands that are ahead. So that is, from a content point of view, I would say, if I was to think of, I'm going to leave podcast out of this because that's sort of a different conversation. But the way I look at it, there are these two much abused terms, right? There is innovation and there is insight, right? So and again, harking back, I remember back when I was at Google, a company to be unnamed, but the CMO called and said, "Yaar, hamara na bada launch aa raha hai. Can you make it on your homepage, Google, niche powered by XXX," right? Right? Or at Facebook, I've had requests ki, "Oh, we have this massive new recipe line launching something. Can you make your logo face cook for a day?" Right?
Okay,
so
I have an addition there. We had a client, I will not name again, and we had pitched something called, and it was food again. So we said Facebook.com is what we had pitched.
Right.
And his question was, can you divert traffic from Facebook.com? If somebody types in Facebook.com, can that get redirected to Facebook.com? And we were like, we don't know Mark, so we can't call him up and ask him, can you redirect? But
unlikely
that Mark will let us redirect from Facebook to Facebook.com. But
right.
we will get back to you on that. Is all we could say.
Yeah. So I think I have maybe 100 examples. So even with Spotify, it's just so there are some things that I think in the ecosystem, you have that news website and suddenly it will break open and one motorcycle will come out of it, right? So I think these are two abused terms, I feel, right? Whenever somebody comes to me and says, "Yeah, we want to do something really innovative," my point is, listen, I'm able to tell you that this person who is on X kind of device or is so old, or say a mom, living in Pune, is going for a run right now, right? What can you do with that information, right? Isn't that innovation? So for me, I feel like many people think of innovation as this shiny thing that has never happened before. But if you think of digital, just the capability to be personalized, to be contextual, to be relevant, to use all this information that is there to create a delightful experience for the consumer is amazing innovation, right? And most brands don't really think about it that way. So, for example, they'll come and tell me, "Oh, can you tell me when, on your platform, somebody is listening to sleep music?" I'm like, "Sure, I can, but will you design a creative that is suited for somebody who's trying to fall asleep, right? Or are you going to play a heavy metal ad when that's going to come up, right?" So I think that is one aspect of it, which is, again, to the content point, they will always, and audio, they will always be brands that have music as a part of the DNA. So, Levi's, Nike, Red Bull, there's so many brands that have sort of imbibed it into Coca-Cola, right? So for them, it's relatively easier. I think for the rest, you need to figure out really based on the data, based on what you really understand about the consumer, all the targeting in the world, how are you going to improve the experience that you have and how are you going to get the message out in the right way? And that's where the sort of crux lies, right? Sure, there is a place to do the shiny disco ball, completely out of whack thing. You should do it, but that's not the sole purpose of what you're doing, right? From a marketing point of view.
The point you made about the sleep music, right? And that's one of the key things I feel, and I have to explain. I've had to explain many times because whichever brand I speak to and say, okay, you're doing a podcast. Tell us what we can actually do. The point has always been about saying that what you've so far done have been active mediums. Like it requires, like you said, all your attention, screen fatigue, all that kind of comes in. This is a passive medium. And the good part about a passive medium is you actually use it while you are doing something else. Like even the earlier examples you spoke about, which is, when you're taking a walk, when you're going for a run, working out,
cooking, cleaning the house,
cleaning the house. Like I think that's the biggest uptick where people say, okay, you're not doing a commute. What are you doing? It is early days of lockdown. When I was doing the dishes, right, literally, like listen to a podcast, my podcast consumption happened cleaning house, washing dishes. So it's almost like it blends into your life, and so all the content has to almost be that way. So it is seamlessly blending into. So the other day and it's a bizarre example. There was someone who wrote into me and said that I was listening to your podcast, and there's a tone which you spoke, but one of your guests who came in was a lot more. He said, I felt like I went from soothing meditative music to suddenly going into a metal concert. And I said that I can't do anything about that. My guest was a slightly more energetic person. I'm more relaxed. But I think that's actually the trick, what you just said, is that make sure that tonality continues. And that's the way you can actually do it very seamlessly.
Yeah. And I'll give you a few examples. Like I was listening to your podcast with Mantra, right? Where he talked about like what we call theater of the mind, right? So, the pink elephant example, now that we've said it, people are going to think of it, right? So I think one is audio at a subliminal level, is emotional. It connects to what you're thinking, imaginative. I think that's that. Second is you want to focus on behavior. So 80% plus listening happens on headphones, right? So how are you using that? Right? What are you doing with it? Are you doing, like, for example, people do 3D audio, right? You create immersive experience, right? Third is, okay, there are moments, right? So your consumer is your consumer, but that consumer does 10 things in a day, right? Out of those, which are the moments that are important to you and how are you being relevant and meaningful at that point in time? So there are so many things. If you come to podcasts, so I'll sort of maybe make one clarifying point about how we think about it. So in the audio world, I would say that music is more lean back and podcast is more lean forward, right? So while it is still, I don't have to look at something, I can still do something else, but I do need that focus, right? So if I'm listening to music and somebody's talking to me, I'm okay missing a couple of 30 seconds of it. But if I'm listening to a podcast and my attention gets diverted, I do do 30 seconds back and I want to catch that sort of sequence that I missed. So I think there are different modes of listening. Specifically with podcasts, I think a few things. One, if you have great stories to tell, do it, right? But don't do it just because people are doing podcasts, so let me do something, right? I think that's completely pointless. Second is the host, the person, if it's a hosted show like your show, for example, right? Not fiction, etc. But if it's a hosted show, a lot of the people listen to this podcast because there is some inherent trust and belief in what you are bringing to them. Right? It's not because I'm on the show, but it's because you are curating it, you're bringing these people. So there is an inherent bit of trust there. So how can you use the right hosts to drive the right message, right? And again, from a research point of view, we found that ads in podcasts, because they are a personal recommendation, right? They're like, hey, listen, I worked with this brand. They want to be a part of this podcast. I use their product. It's great. Try it. I think that just is a very different level. It's like word of mouth from somebody you trust, but millions of people can listen, right? So how do you leverage that? I think those are the things that still need to be explored. I think it's very, very early days in podcasts. Like obviously there's a lot of stuff happening, but I feel there is so much more to unlock in terms of how brands really use podcasts, that it's white space right now.
Just a slight aside, a lot of people listen to this podcast are young, starting their careers, are going to start their careers. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of what is going to be something they can do. I've had people who said, okay, I've been doing this, studying this so far, will that be irrelevant going ahead, etc. Right? Especially with the kind of modern organizations that are there today, and also like in terms of what you look at when you want to kind of bring on someone, what are the key things that you think someone needs to be focused on today to almost be able to have a strong career going ahead?
Yeah. See, I'm probably a very bad person to answer this question because,
the people who say that generally give the best responses. I have realized.
So, there is this Sunscreen song. Have you heard that? This guy who made Romeo and Juliet, I keep forgetting his name. There's to the class of '97, ladies and gentlemen. I'll send you a link to the song. It's called the Sunscreen. So Laz Berman did it, right? Yeah. In that, there's a line that says that don't worry so much if you're 25 and you don't know what to do with your life. Some of the most interesting 40-year-olds I know still don't know what to do with their lives, right? Yeah. So at least the reason why I said I may be a bad example is because a lot of it is just lucky accident. So in retrospect, it's easy to say, do these 20 things. But for me, I'll tell you, I can say what worked for me, right? And hopefully that's useful. One is what you call a growth mindset, right? So, and there are two phases. Obviously, the first phase is when you're trying to figure out where you want to go, what you want to do. So obviously, you want to invest enough time in boring things like reading the annual report, right? Reading all the interviews with the CEO. And I find so many people apply to jobs at Spotify and I do these interviews and I find that even many cases, even those kind of things are missing, right? Yeah. So if you have a great understanding of what is this business, why are they here, what do they want to do, and what can I do as a part of this, right? And is that interesting to me? Is that interesting to the company? Then you have a great shot, right? So I think the pre-phase needs a lot more prep, a lot more clarity of thinking in terms of why, what, am I going to be here for a long time, short time, all of that. But none of that necessarily needs to pan out once you're in, right? I think second is dealing with uncertainty. And I think that for me is because all these companies have been at early stage. So most of the times you get 10 questions in the day, 8 of them you don't have answers to, right? So I believe finding information across an organization, finding the people who will help you, asking questions when it may sound like a dumb question, but having the sort of bravery to ask it, uh, tapping into institutional knowledge, I feel is again something that is really sort of probably not, given enough importance, because so say you're in Google today, there are people from maybe from 10 years ago to now who have done all kinds of crazy things, right?
Yeah.
Nothing stops you from setting up a 30-minute coffee chat with them and just tell me about what you did here, right? So I think the ability to learn and the ability to operate in uncertainty are extremely critical and will continue to be more critical going ahead. And no course will teach you, right? I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification.
Same here.
In fact, I found out, I should tell you, I also work in a call center, right? Straight out of college. I didn't know that about you.
Which one were you in?
I was in Bangalore. It used to be called Customer Asset. Then it became ICICI OneSource or First Source.
I was in Bangalore, but I was in AOL cancellations. So.
Oh, interesting. Nice. So I think if, as long as you have that growth mentality, the ability to learn, dealing with uncertainty is actually, I found, very challenging for people. There is no way to really learn it unless you are in it, and then you are able to take a clear-headed point of view on what's going on, what you want to do. And I think the final one is just focusing on, don't mistake motion for progress, right? The whole rocking horse analogy. Ki sab kuch chal raha hai, but that doesn't mean you're going anywhere. The people who had the best careers across these companies that I know of are people who used like what we would call jungle gym opportunities, right? You spend 2-3 years, suddenly there's something completely new and you're like, this sounds interesting. I'm not trying to retire from this company. Let me give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
And risk taking at that level, I think, has also paid off, especially when you're in the kind of companies that reward risks. I don't know if this is useful. I'm sorry, but
no, of course, I think it's very useful because the thing is, some of the pieces you spoke of, right, are so important in terms of obviously learning more about the company before you join it. I think the interview process, many times we don't think about that. We always go these are the almost like pre-existing. Okay, I know this much about this company, so it's going. That little bit of extra research kind of helps. There's no harm in, and I'm a strong believer in stupid questions. So stupid questions are always the best questions because you will learn so much more from that. I actually call them out. So I have this thing which I do. I've done this in meetings for years. Is that whenever I ask a question, I will say I have a stupid question. So I've stated that at worst it'll meet expectations. At best it won't be a stupid question. So that's been my trick for years. I don't use the word stupid. I use the word call, but I've just said stupid because I don't know why I was doing PG-13 on a podcast. But
the call questions are the best.
Yeah. You mentioned taking risks, etc. Right? There was this gap just before you joined Spotify where you spent 2 years working, for a non-profit. Because I found that interesting because I looked at your entire career. I'm like, this is an interesting phase, and there must have been a strong reason why you took that call. I know a lot of people right now, especially are in the mindset of taking moving away from what they're doing right now and going towards other direction. So what was the thought then?
So I think, I had spent a significant amount of time at Facebook. Like I was this, first employee in Gurgaon, did the first lease of the office and all of that stuff. Yeah. So Facebook was great, but by the time, and even within Facebook, I actually took a risk before the non-profit thing, right? So I moved away from ad sales to something called Workplace by Facebook, which is a B2B enterprise collaboration sort of platform. I had no experience in tech B2B, right? This is Microsoft, IBM land, like completely new, but I figured, okay, go talk to people, pitch them, see what happens. And the reason why I did that was there was really nothing more. Like when I was having conversations internally about what else do you do, there was like, okay, why don't you go to Singapore, right? Yeah. Or why don't you try this, a global role? And I was like, no, India is where all the action is happening. Why would I want to go to Singapore? And so it got to that point where there was no new stuff to do. It was just keep doing what you're doing. This is great. Numbers were great. Business was good, right? So all of that was fine. So when Workplace came up, I was like, okay, one more startup inside Facebook. This is fun. Let's do it. Went into that for about a year. I think that particular it was just so different from everything else that Facebook was doing. It had its obvious challenges. And then I was also kind of getting bored overall of, the Facebook ecosystem. I was like, okay, 5-6 years, this is good. Let's try something else. Challenge was that everything else was the same, right? So whoever I was talking to, e-commerce companies, media houses, all of that, it was like, okay, there's no newness to any of this. It's just a different visiting card or whatever, and you get on with it. And at that time, I was also, I think, with everything that was happening as I grew older, also became a lot more politically conscious, a lot more socially aware. I think my wife is a lot more, I would say, socially inclined than I am. And it was, again, a lucky accident, I would say. Atul Satija, who runs Give, he was looking to sort of scale that up, build a core team, and so on. We got chatting. It was Bangalore, so I was like, okay, let's at least get out of Gurgaon. I've been wanting to get out of Gurgaon for 15 years. This is my opportunity. Let's go. Atul is a very inspirational leader, right? Doing something insane with what he's doing with Give and Nudge and Encore. He was building a great team. So it seemed like, and it was not so much of a departure. So, saying non-profit sounds like, you're taking a jhola and going to villages.
Yeah,
it wasn't that. It was still a digital platform. We were trying to solve online giving for Indians, right? So the core of it was still very much digital. But what I had to do there, and it took me some time to figure out really, okay, what am I going to do here? It was more about building out the sort of new platform, marketing, user acquisition growth, which was, again, new to me because I had always talked to marketers from the other side of the table, right?
Correct.
This was the first time I actually had to do marketing, and I emerged from that with all the scales falling off my eyes and extremely high regard for marketers the moment I had to really sit in the seat that they were in. But for me, that was super useful, met a lot of inspirational people, worked with a lot of, and at the end of the day, the risk was what? Money, right? Because obviously the nonprofit ecosystem doesn't pay you anywhere close to what the corporate salaries are. So, we took a call, okay, let's give it a shot for a couple of years. It's the only downside really is money. We'll survive, right? And then, we'll see where it goes from there. So I had an amazing experience. I think that was my real startup experience because you don't have money, you're a nonprofit, you don't have resources, you don't have sort of anything. It's not like, I can confidently walk in and say, oh, we are a startup in India, we are Spotify, but you're not really a startup, right? So taught me a lot, super valuable. I think after 2 years, it reached that same point where I think my own contributions to the organization, I felt were not as much as I would want them to be. And I was like, okay, maybe I've done my 2-year stint. Let's figure out what happened next. And, again, lucky accident, Spotify came calling. It was music, no brainer for me. I was like, okay, let's sort of go. So that was that. But if there are really young people listening, I would want to encourage all of them to think of, giving as a behavior, right? Just inculcating the habit of giving. It's one of the most fulfilling things that you can do. And to sort of think, at whatever is the right stage, how can they do sort of larger contributions in the social good space? I think for a country like ours, it's essential that more young people go in that direction.
Yeah. You make a valid point, right? And even during this entire period of lockdown, what has been amazing for me to listen to is, you'd get those calls saying, we're doing some work for frontline workers, we're doing some work for, for people who aren't as, privileged is the word, right? as privileged as all of us are, with the fact that we have a home, to live in, we're able to order stuff online. I think we're in that category, right? Most people who have called me have been really young people who've said, I'm just taking I'm doing this while I'm studying from home, and I thought I should do something else. And they've all been young people, right? Spoke about what they're doing in their careers, spoke about the fact that I like someone who was going to go study abroad has had to stay back saying, I'm doing this as well. So I think what you're saying is correct. It's been so amazing to see that this is a generation actually believes in that part of it. Yeah. Which honestly, when I go back to even when I was their age, it furthest from my mind is what I would honestly say. But it's great to see that.
Yeah, and I think it may also be generational, right? So if you look at it, I'm on the cusp of, I'm pre-millennial, right? So I'm Gen X, or whatever it is. But, the tendency not to want to own a home, right? Or, my kids' generation is probably going to be the most environmentally aware generation that's going to come out because their world is the one that's going to get screwed up, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there are a lot of those things that are at play subliminally. Mm-hmm. But yes, I think a lot of the giving / social good stuff that I saw during pandemic, Kerala floods, everything was sort of what you call spontaneous outbursts of young people wanting to do something interesting, and long may it continue, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, we have this Culture Next report that should be launching sometime in a couple of months, where we've done sort of a deeper dive into Gen Z's, millennials, their attitudes, behaviors, and this comes out there as well, right? Where they're dissatisfied with the world that's been set up for them. but also not willing to say that, so let's deal with it, right? There is that intent key, no, I have to do something about this, right? And I hope it continues.
Yep. Towards the end of every episode, I do this segment called Humans of Advertising. There's some interesting pieces about you which came up when in a so I will seed them in here through what are generally my standard questions.
Sure, I'm terrible at these things. I'm petrified of them. But sure.
What is that one or two things that you are obsessed with, or which you are a huge fan of, or spend a lot of time doing, which most people would be like, really, you're into that a lot? What would that be?
I mean, I don't know if your question is most people know or don't know, but I would say one is obviously old Mohanlal movies, right? I'm a hardcore Malayalam movie buff, of course, but Malayalam movies especially, I think, and very clearly I'm saying Mohanlal and not Mammootty, right? So I may get some hate on Twitter for this club, Mallu Bros, but so I think for me, there is a Mohanlal movie dialogue for every situation in life, right? Unfortunately, most of the people I interact with are not Malayali, so they don't get exposed to that, but at home, I have that one line for everything. It's usually
one Mohanlal line for everything.
One Mohanlal line for everything. So that's there. And I think the other thing, just sort of in terms of what I do, I think of myself as a writer, though I haven't written anything substantial except some comics and so on. But if I had to live on skill, right, the one skill I would possibly go back to is writing, because I feel like that's something that I can do.
You briefly mentioned comics. Wait, what is that?
Yeah, so there was this. In the Mint, at one time, a few years back, the Mint was publishing these full-page comics every Wednesday, right? I think the editor of Mint at that time was big. I think he still is. He's not the editor of Mint anymore, but he was a very big comic book fan. So he had this thing that I want to do comics, and by some lucky coincidence, the people who were sort of given that mandate to create this comic were juniors from college, right? And I used to write these blogs way back in 2003, 2004, when blogs was cool and new, and blogging. They were like, "Hey, you used to write back then. Do you still do it?" I was like, "I don't, but tell me what's up." And they were like, "Oh, we're planning to do a full page comic in the newspaper." I was like, "Full?" So usually you get a strip, right? This is like full page. I was like, "Oh, this is insane!" So I can get to print whatever crazy idea I have in a leading business newspaper, and nobody's asking me ye kya, kyun hai, kya hai. Of course I'll do it, right? So I wasn't only writing them. They were sort of illustrated by various artists. Over time I did about maybe 15, 20 of them, including the first few that came out. That was a superb experience, right? Because writing it is it's storyboarding, because in comics you have to think in panels and all of that. Not that I've done any course around, maybe I'm completely wrong, but that was super fun. I have all those newspapers somewhere, with the intention that kisi din isko frame karenge and all of that. But that was super fun.
Anything that you've read, listened to, or watched recent times that you would recommend? I know you're a huge book reader.
Yeah, books. So I'm usually reading 2 or 3 books in parallel, depending on what I feel like. So right now, I've noticed over the last, I think, 5-8 years, a big lean towards nonfiction. I was abhorrent of nonfiction. I would, sneer at people who would read nonfiction. Kya hai bakwas, matlab, what are you going to learn? Read textbook for types. But I think I still don't read business books, right? So that's very clear for me. But history, economics, I think these two are starting to, and again, podcasts, I think, are to credit for that. So I've been reading this book on the sort of modern South Indian history by Rajmohan Gandhi. I think that's super interesting, maybe because I'm South Indian, so that's one. I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun to get that context on South India over the last 500, 600 years. I'm reading this hard science fiction. I don't know if you heard about, I don't know how to pronounce the author's name, Chinese Cixin Liu. The 3-body problem. It's a trilogy. So there's 3-body problem. There's the Dark Forest, and there's Death's End. I'm on the 3rd one. It's extreme hard science fiction. Like, many times I'm just like, what am I doing? But still fun. So I would strongly recommend that if people are into science fiction. These are the top 2 that I'm currently on my bookshelf and reading.
Okay. I actually just started, and I've gone hardcore business book. So I'm reading the No Rules, which is the Reed Hastings book. Very interesting. It's been interesting to kind of see. I also like how it's written. It's not just written by him. It's written by him and another author, someone who'd written this book called The Culture Map. So it's 2 perspectives. So it's not necessarily pro every single thing that Netflix does, but it's actually talking about the good and the bad of every single policy they have, how they built it out. So yeah, it's not an all positive one. It's what I've liked about it. About 40% in right now.
Yeah, and I think with everything that Netflix does and Reed Hastings, the famous culture memo, I find there's so much honesty generally,
Correct.
Right? In the way that Netflix comes across as a company that people are big fan. Maybe I'll make an exception for this one and read it.
And this is generally my last question of every episode. Why will advertising not die?
Why? I mean, there is no reason for advertising to die. It's an essential service. People need things. I think outside. See, the business reasons are clear, right? Yeah. There is a market. There are consumers. There are products. You need to get them out. You need to create awareness. But for me, it's also so much a part of culture, right?
Yeah.
So, if you think about it, like way back in the Doordarshan days, the ads were actually so much better than the content that you had, right? I mean, you remember, Krishi Darshan or whatever, but the ad guys had freedom. They could do whatever they wanted. So I think and again, so much music that I've discovered, like Superstition by Stevie Wonder. The first time I heard it was on a Levi's ad, right? Nina Simone's Cinnamon. The first time I heard that was in a Nokia ad, right?
Yeah.
So I think business reasons are clear. Advertising is not going away. It's useful to everybody within that ecosystem if done well. But it's also such a cultural lever for so many things that messages that need to go out that it's essential. I feel it's always going to be there.
Thanks so much for doing this. This has been a lot of fun. I know we've gone multiple directions, but I'm glad we did this, and I think there's a lot. To take from different segments, if I call it, of the entire episode. Yeah,
thanks so much for having me, Varun. I hope this was useful and interesting to all your listeners. Thanks so much. It was great chatting with you.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel, for supporting us. Great week on the network. If you haven't been listening, why haven't you been listening? You should be listening. Rohan Joshi was on Uncle Please Sit, discussed the toxicity of the Indian pop culture. Really fun conversation to listen to. Rajiv Samant, the founder of Sula Wines, was on Cyrus Says. Again, I think that was a fun conversation. Also want to call out the season finale of Yuddha. Yuddha is our military history podcast. Definitely do check that out. It's a really great listen. And finally, I want to just remind you all that, it's a dark time, but if you need a smile, go check out the Smile India podcast by Shifa Mehta. It's in both English and Hindi, and I think that you will really enjoy the kinds of things that she's talking about there. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives, and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Story Sellers for personal stories, analysis, and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.